Hi, this is Celeste with the Celeste Report, and today I have Andrew Gabriel Roth back, and we are going to explore the mysteries of light and Hanukkah. We want to do something other than downer news, something inspirational, and it's good in this time of dark to not just be consumed with darkness. And so, hopefully, God willing, we will bring a little bit of light to each of you today.
Hi, everyone. Shalom. Glad to be here with you, Celeste, as always.
Sorry about forgetting to do the introduction. I'm looking at my chat that is still from yesterday and it's not repopulating, so I don't know what I did wrong. They changed my platform at midnight not last night, but the night before. So I haven't
Wow.
had much time and it's all
With that.
different. So I have no idea. Maybe I won't get to look at the chat today. Maybe I'll just take it down and that way I don't have to be distracted by it. So if you guys, I won't be looking at the chat until I figure out how to operate the new chat.
Looks like someone came in. Good morning from Oregon.
Oh, then maybe I better get back to the chat.
Michelle Munoz, it looks like.
Hold on.
And Michael said, hi, folks. So
Okay.
your chat is repopulating.
It is okay, so I brought it back up.
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah, but it has the time. It's 10:25 that it's popped up, so it's not from yesterday.
Okay. Sounds good. I just love all these new systems. I had 2 websites that did this on the same day.
Yeah.
So it's been like bumper cars. It's like for those of you that don't do this every day, it's like having freeway traffic and you can't get over to the lane that you want to get out of. And you're just learning all these new things and trying not to bump cars as you go along. So anyway, let's dive in and I know that you do a Hanukkah special each year for your subscribers,
Right.
which is very well appreciated. And you have this fabulous 2-part free video on the Christmas star.
Yes.
So share about how people can subscribe to you.
Yep. Well, the website is One Faith, One People Ministries. That's with an S.com, and it's all one word, no hyphens, underscore, or anything, and it's all lowercase. So at One Faith, One People Ministries, what we do is we provide about 3 to 4 hours of fresh biblical content on the weekly Torah readings, which includes prophets or Haftorah, and yes, the New Testament too. I'm a New Testament translator. And what we do is basically there's 4 videos. First video, we read the actual weekly Parsha, do some very light extemporaneous commentary, whatever comes up as I'm reading. It's a basic video though. And so that's video 1. Video 2 is when I read the rest of the biblical stuff for that week. So the Haftorah, the prophets, and then the apostolic writings, the renewed covenant stuff. Video 3 is where we do the deep dive into Hebrew and Aramaic linguistics, multiple meanings of various words, insights from clues in the text, and all those things that come up because the letters are numbers and you've got your codes within codes. So that's video 3. Video 4 is sort of the closest thing that I do to a sermon, and it's called the Torah Thought for the Week. That's what I close with, but I'll also answer members' questions from the previous week and pose study questions for the following week. So that's basically what it is. It's between 2.5 and 3.5 hours on average. And throughout the year, we also do free holiday teachings. So right now, for example, the Hanukkah special, which you mentioned, Celeste, is actually up there right now and it's a long story. I won't get into it. We're doing feasts earlier than the rabbinic this particular year. But since it doesn't matter when you decide to do Hanukkah, because if you do rabbinic, it'll have been up there for 4 weeks. Or if you do it when we do it, it's there on time, as it were. And the same thing for your Passover, your Pentecost, your Tabernacles, Purim. Even we got 7 of these holiday specials that hit throughout the year, and they are all free. You don't have to join the ministry, but we have yearly and monthly plans for people who want to go deep in their Bible study. It's there for them, and also special historical things that come up throughout the year. I have to admit, I'm kind of behind in filming my PowerPoints. I did one on Daniel 8 and 9 like 5 months ago. I've been meaning to film it, but we've been traveling. I got another one on the history of how the Bible came together. Haven't had time to record that one, and so on. But we really give away a lot of things so that people can be comfortable with the teaching style and what we do. But if you want your fresh biblical content every week, you can do it annually, you can do it monthly, whatever you like. That's basically what I do, in
And
addition to
so,
traveling.
and so my favorite part is, so this is material that you are not going to hear anywhere else. Daniel, uh, you got Daniel, Andrew, he has he's a linguist in Aramaic, Hebrew, of course, Greek, and he's got the actual screenshots. He just came out with the apostolic writings. If you don't have it, you need to get it. But what he does is he just blows you away. You're just like, you think you know the word, and then he just like hits you with all this stuff. And so your head is like reeling by the end of each of those videos. And so you go, now, what did he say about that? I remember he said something about that. And so, what Andrew also provides is a PDF. So you can go back and look and say, oh, okay. And you can go, okay. You could take it at a slower pace, in other words. And so you
Yep.
can pick it up and insert it into those memory banks in your head so that every time you read the scripture in the future, it's there, or you can reference back to it. So that's, to me, that's one of the high price values that you give, Andrew. So let's dig into some light
Thank
and
you. Thank you. And
Hanukkah.
I love, sure. So one of the things that's neat about Hanukkah is that it's got more foreshadowing in the First Covenant writings than any other feast. Okay. You get all of these little hints from Genesis, and they continue in the New Testament all the way to Revelation and stuff like that. So I'll give you a little example of that. In Genesis 14:14, Abraham has 318 trained men, right? And the word for trained or dedicate is Hanukkah. Okay. You have also Nehemiah building the wall and dedicating it for 8 days. You have the prophet Haggai, and I know I'm taking this stuff out of order, but just to give you an idea, the day that they laid the foundation stone for the second temple, where Haggai got 2 visions from our Heavenly Father, was the 24th day of the 9th month of Kislev. And so here you have laid the foundation of the temple. It seems very logical that the next day is going to be a party. And so it's like they held that date in like a placeholder so that a couple hundred years later, this would be the time of the Hanukkah feast. And Yeshua, Jesus, kept Hanukkah in John 10:22-42. And my Star of Bethlehem teaching, which I don't have time to go over here because it's 2 hours plus, it's 2 videos, proves that Yeshua was conceived in the middle of Hanukkah on the Festival of Lights. The light of the world is conceived basically on the 5th night of Hanukkah. And if you know how the light works, you have your middle candle, which is your servant candle, right? And that candle lights all the others. on the Hanukkah or menorah. And what's really interesting is that it's a direct tie into Revelation, where those menorahs represent the actual churches that John is referring to. And when Yeshua or Jesus is talking, he basically says, that if you misbehave, I'm going to take your menorah away from you. So this has got some very powerful, just for Hanukkah, and that's just a very small part of what we're going to be talking about. You have these extensions that go all the way back to Genesis and all the way forwards to literally to Revelation, almost to the end of Revelation. One of the things that fascinates me, though, is the Hebrew word for light, which is spelled Aleph, Wa, Resh, or. Okay. So when we're reading in Genesis 1, he says, Yehi or, Vayehi or, and basically says, and said God, Vayehi or, let there be light, and there was light. What's fairly interesting about this word for light is that in Aramaic, the word it becomes the word for Torah. So that the Aramaic word for Torah or the books of Moses is orata. And not only was that word said by Yeshua himself, the rabbis actually used it in the Talmud to call it the Torah as basically the light, orata. And finally, and we can figure out where you want to go from this last little piece, that the rabbis noticed that if you have a word that starts with your aleph, which is your letter A, and you swap out that as your first letter and switch it to an ayin, which is also silent like the aleph is, and you keep the rest of the letters, what happens is what is good becomes bad. It's a bad substitution. So, for example, if aleph, wa, resh is light, ayin, swapping out the aleph of the island, ayin is ayin, wa, resh is blindness. So it's like you take away the aleph and you become blind when you switch it for the ayin. Because what the ayin stands for is nothingness or oblivion. And so you basically said bye-bye to your light by having the aleph go away and the ayin come alongside and spell the word. So have at it, and from any other directions you want me to look at. But light is an extremely powerful term, especially at this time of year, with Hanukkah coming.
Okay, so you know that I'm doing this manuscript and I'm wrestling with it, and you're much more a linguist than I am.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm wrestling with Bereshit, the beginning,
Right.
in the beginning. So there was the beginning. So I'm wrestling with this time, space, and frequency.
Right.
So did God speak the beginning into being?
Yes.
He did.
Yes, he did.
He does say which word is that?
Well, Bereshit, we got to kind of break down Bereshit to see how that works.
Okay.
One thing that the ancients recognized, but they don't like to talk about, is that Bereshit can be understood as a plural. That it's in the beginnings, plural. When you go to Genesis 2, verse 4, what it says is, this is the record of generations, which is the word toledot. And because it's like a genealogy of creation, and because there's more than one subject in a genealogy, rabbis looked at that and said, there is a spiritual creation going on, and then there is a physical creation going on at the same time, and they each have a different record of different generations. So what ends up happening is in Bereshit is the word Brit, and the word Brit is covenant. So there is covenant in creation. And as we talked about orata being the Aramaic word for Torah, there is light, let there be light, in the Torah. So these things, they tie together in a very, very particular way. My final thing on this is with Bereshit is that there is an ancient Aramaic interpretation of the Hebrew called Onkelos, which is highly regarded by Jews all over the world. Onkelos uses this word bakadmin, which is plural. That in is definitely plural, indicating that Bereshit is plural. And what bakadmin means is in the eternities, plural. This is what came out of the eternities. What comes out? The covenant, breed. What comes out? Light, orata, or. And so all of these concepts are in the most ancient understandings that we have of the first words of our Hebrew Bible.
So
Does that help?
would or be frequency?
Yes. And that and it would be, because light is a frequency. It is both a particle and a wave, right? And if you think about the way John uses this, now, if you're reading your Greek, it's just in the beginning, there's the word. Nothing to see here, folks. Nothing wrong with the word logos either, but it's a very limiting term, right? Like davar is just, word, right? Or maybe issue or matter as you do it in modern Hebrew. But in terms of the word for word in Aramaic, its meanings are frequency, emanation, manifestation, vibration. So you could say in John 1:1 in Aramaic and be perfectly valid. In the beginning, there was the vibration. In the beginning, there was the emanation, the frequency, the manifestation. And all those are right. And if you really want to know which I prefer, the answer is I think I prefer all of them at once.
Yes, yes, I do too.
You know,
So if there was dark light, because you said this is physical and this is spiritual at the same time. So when there's the dark generations or Toledo,
right.
then what is
They would
that,
become
like
blind.
corrupt frequency, or is that the lack of frequency?
Well, in a way, it's both, because the frequency, if you take out part of the frequency, it dies. So you start with a lack of frequency. It's sort of like cutting off somebody's head. And in a very short time, the whole body will be dead. I mean, I don't mean to be that violent but it's just what I could think about here. So it is both an incompletion as well as a death. Okay, that's how I look at it. One of the other things to look at is Psalm 33:6, which says that by the word of Yahweh was everything made, and by His breath, which is Yeshua, by the way. So we see what's within the breath, what's within going to be your emanation, your frequency. Once again, and I find it fascinating that this word miltha it means both word and frequency. So there you have your tie. Within one word that means word, it also means frequency.
So miltha is an Aramaic word.
An Aramaic exclusive word. It does not have any cognate in Hebrew, but in Hebrew, its root is used to say proverb, saying. The book of Proverbs is mithle, whereas the Aramaic word is miltha, and yes, it's the same root. So when Yeshua is doing a parable or a proverb or a saying, he's doing a miltha and is the miltha.
So it's kind of like, to put it in simplistic terms, if you were an actor doing a play on the stage and you were highlighting shining the spotlight on a particular actor, that's what the word is doing, correct?
Yes, I think that's an apt metaphor, and of course, all our metaphors will only be able to highlight a very small aspect of the infinitude of this word, that is word. But because you're also looking at light and light of the word, and the word being a light of our path, as David said, those connections between word and light and frequency, vibration, manifestation, they have been with us from the earliest days of the Bible.
That's exciting. So, what interesting things can we learn about Yeshua Jesus um, observing Hanukkah?
Ah, well, the first thing we need to realize is that Hanukkah was an optional feast. It's in the rainy season, right? And you wouldn't normally choose to do a feast in a rainy season because your crops are done, right? That's the original party is, yay, here's the barley, yay, here's the wheat, yay, here's the grapes, right? But it's a historical moment in time that celebrates deliverance of the Jewish people. And what we learned is that Yeshua kept an optional feast in a very inconvenient time of the year. It's the rainy season. Read about Ezra and Nehemiah when they had to get these people to set aside their wives, their foreign wives, and how miserable it is right at the time of Hanukkah, okay? And therefore Christmas too. That Yeshua he was in Galilee. He had to walk more than 3 days in muddy, wet, nasty conditions to do an optional feast and get into an argument. And because that feast was important to him, because not only did he proclaim just a couple months earlier at Sukkot, I am the light of the world, right? We forget about that. In the first century, Hanukkah was looked at as a backup for Sukkot. So that if you were sort of like a soldier and you were on campaign and you couldn't do Sukkot, Hanukkah was your backup feast because you would return home for the rainy season, right? And when Yeshua knows he's going to get into that argument, what he says to the Pharisees is one of the most important things he will ever say. I and my Father are one. John 10:30. He waited till Hanukkah to tell them that I and my Father are one. So that all of that, he didn't have to do. He didn't have to do it. He wanted to do it. He didn't have to make it. He wanted to make the journey. He didn't have to engage in some of his deepest truths. He did it anyway, because the pattern that we see with the Messiah over and over again is that he goes above and beyond what even the Pharisees are doing in terms of keeping the Torah. To give you one quick example of that, you remember in Matthew 17 that the seventh month had come around, and Yeshua tells the disciples that this demon doesn't go out except by prayer and fasting, and how Yeshua was fasting and the disciples were not, which is why they couldn't drive the demon out. Well, what a lot of people don't know is when the Pharisees come to collect that temple tax, they do it the week before Yom Kippur, the Day of Atonement, your required fast in the Bible. And so when they come collecting the shekel tax, it's an optional fast day called the Fast of Gedaliah. You didn't have to keep it. Gedaliah was the Roman governor, the Babylonian Nebuchadnezzar put a Jewish governor in charge of a very small remnant and left them in land to see how they would do. They killed Gedaliah out of envy, which brought more recriminations from Nebuchadnezzar. And it was such a disaster that they made that a fast day, the Fast of Gedaliah. Yeshua kept that fast, drove out the demon. The disciples did not keep that fast. Maybe they were just trying to get emotionally ready for Yom Kippur, which is the next week, because that's when that temple tax was collected, the week before Yom Kippur. and therefore they could not drive out the demon. So all of these things are showing. The reason I bring that up is just like him keeping a fast that was tradition but not required. He didn't have to go to Jerusalem either, but he loved Hanukkah so much that he did. And he loved it because he was the light of the world, conceived in the midpoint of the Festival of Lights. And it was the last Hanukkah he would ever have. So he's definitely going to make an appearance that very last Hanukkah, to get ready to die at Passover in the spring, the following spring.
I think this is important for us to remember too, in the context that you presented it, because we're in a time of spiritual warfare. There are demons out there, and some of them require prayer and fasting, shining the light of Yeshua, Jesus, and driving them out of the land, or a person, or whatever you're trying to do, whether it's a territorial spirit or a demon-possessed demoniac. So that's really interesting to know, and keep in our minds.
Yeah. Well, one of my best friends is a deliverance minister, and he deals with soul fragments and spirit fragments. And yes, there's a difference. Apparently, I haven't drilled down in that, but I can tell you that the Aramaic does support the idea that spirits and souls can get shattered and need to be put back together. And instead of, like, for example, as the Greek would say in James 5, I think it's 5:12, don't be divided in your minds. So the Greek word is mind. The Aramaic word is soul. So it's kind of a bit trippy, I guess, but yeah, your soul can be divided. And if it can be divided, it can be broken, and then you get Yeshua quoting Isaiah 61, blessed are those who are broken in spirit, basically. So that gets into applications for spiritual healing and spiritual warfare to allow the healing to take place. And so, from what little I know in that direction, I mean, I don't know the practical on the ground side, but I can say the linguistic support what a lot of deliverance ministers, Christian and Messianic, are doing.
So what other things can we learn from light in the scripture?
Well, one of the things, of course, is that white light is comprised of 7 colors. We all learned Roy G. Biv going into school as a way to memorize the colors of a rainbow, right? So red, orange, yellow, blue, green, blue, indigo, violet, right? Your colors. Now, one of the things that's important about a rainbow, before a whole bunch of people perverted it, which we won't get into because it's just going to make me upset, is that it's associated with covenant, because that's Noah saw the rainbow when the flood was over. And the thing about the rainbow is it's literally a bow, as a weapon, as in bow and arrow. A lot of people don't realize that. And so you have to, all of these colors, they pour into the white, what becomes the white light. And so when you are talking about the light of the world, spiritual light, your orata, all of these things, they are inherent in the light, but they need filtering so that you can see, your prisms and stuff, so that you can see it break up, but it's not really broken up. It's just being temporarily sorted in a way that you can see the individual colors. Now, here's one more application about that. As you know, I'm very much into sacred math. And one of the most important numbers in sacred math is 42. I can't get into the details of how this works, but let me give you the headline, right? 42 is a product of 6 times 7. 6 is your number for work, right? 6 days you will work. 7 is the number for perfection, completion, and peace. Pretty easy. Is perfect work. Where does the number show that type of perfection? Well, you've got 42 stops in the wilderness for 42 years, and then you get into the promised land. Perfection. Makes sense, right? You've got 42 generations that Matthew chooses to record, 14, 14, and 14 for Yeshua. So you go from Abraham and you end up with Yeshua. And yes, there's a bit of an accounting error in the Greek, but the Aramaic solves it because Joseph is not it. The first Joseph in 116 is the adopted father of Mary, rather than her husband, who is called Bela, which only means husband in verse 19. So your Greek texts are actually only showing 41 names because of a mistranslation. But I can confirm it's 14, 14, and 14, which adds up to 42. And of course, 14 is the numerical value of David's name because he is the son of David, the son of Abraham, right? So the point of all that, I know I gave a little bit of a data dump there, but here's why I said this. Your rainbow that we were talking about, ask any physicist. You can only see a rainbow at 42 degrees.
Wow.
So that's how 42 is covenant. It's about being in the wilderness, but transitioning into perfect work that gets you to the promised land. And these are the kinds of associations that really help anchor our biblical terms, in this case, about light, about covenant, and about word, and how those three concepts are all over these associations with creation and light and so on.
So is the glory of God the white light?
I believe so. I believe so. But it's also interesting that he has other colors around him, but they are not him. They're like his throne is sapphire, for example. So each color has a particular spiritual use, and it comes up and is repeated again and again and again. The white light being Yahweh, and these other colors around him representing servants, representing, cosmos, majesty, and so on.
So I guess why don't, in a brief nutshell, explain how Hanukkah came to be and how a person would, if they wanted to, observe Hanukkah.
Okay. Well, Hanukkah, I used to get this ribbing from Christian kids growing up in New York all the time. Our special day is about a Prince of Peace, and your special day is about a war. And I would look back at them and I would say, and what a war it was. You have no idea what you're missing out. Because for starters, your song may say you got 12 days of Christmas. We actually have 8 days of Hanukkah. That's the way the Jewish and Christian kids in the 70s would sort of put digs on each other. Hanukkah is the result of a long series of events where a Syrian Greek king named Antiochus Epiphanes, or Antiochus IV, invaded Judea with his army, defiled the temple, forbade all religious customs, sacrificed a pig on the altar, and killed anyone who wouldn't eat the pig. Okay, which was to say everybody. And this brought a response from these aristocratic Jews who live in this particular place called Modin. And these 4 brothers basically outfitted their own army out of their own money, and they fought for 2 years to get the temple back, right? I just saw your chat. Someone's asking me, does Andrew believe in Jesus Christ? Yes, I do. I call him by his Hebrew name, Yeshua HaMashiach of Nazareth, but yeah, it's the same guy. But anyway, moving on from that, uh, Hanukkah celebrates this victory after 2 years of war that they were able to rededicate and clean up the defiled temple. Okay, and so that is what the historical Hanukkah is. The way that we celebrate it today, which is the second part of your question, is we mark those these 8 days that the temple was being cleansed. There's later traditions that sort of stack up on top of that, but you, for each of the 8 days that the temple was being cleaned up and getting ready, uh, for being, used again, right? For each one of those 8 days, you would light a candle at night. There's different ways to light the candle. There was a big debate between these two big rabbis. Most of us go with Hillel, who basically said you light that serving candle, and then each night you light one. The first night you light one of the others. The second night you light two, and so on, so that you fill it up, and it's this beautiful light that's growing. This other guy, Shammai, I guess he was in a really bad mood most of the time. Shammai was like, no, I want to shoot I want all the lights at once and then detract over the days. I'm like, that's depressing. No. So not surprisingly, Shammai's view did not prevail. There's foods that you eat at Hanukkah, sort of like stuff that you get at Purim too, your potato pancakes and various types of sweets to celebrate, this victory. What's interesting, though, is that the Festival of Lights tie-in comes in a bit later. You basically have your earliest source, which is First and Second Maccabees, which is written within about 40 years of the actual events. And then you have the historian Josephus writing some 180 years roughly later. And when it comes to discussing Hanukkah, Josephus basically says, we call it lights, but we don't know why. So if the story of the oil lasting 8 days and you only had 1 day supply of oil, if that was true in Josephus's time, he wouldn't be scratching his head and go, I think it's the light of our liberty, but I'm really not sure. I'll have to get back to you. And so that last piece of the Hanukkah story comes from rabbinic tradition, 2nd century, 3rd century. And what was really weird about the rabbinic tradition is they basically wrote, everybody knows about Hanukkah. We don't need to really explain it. Well, you guys really should have, because that generation of people who knew all about Hanukkah dies and you don't come back to it. And so we don't know what you knew back then. But that's your stratification of the traditions. And it's a time for celebration. It's a time for gift giving. We'll go, well, isn't it just like Christmas? Because your gift giving in Christmas only happened in the last 250 years or so. When George Washington crossed the Delaware, that was on Christmas Day. It was not a day off for him or for the soldiers under his command. It only starts becoming about gift givings, right when Charles Dickens is writing A Christmas Carol in the 1840s. Whereas with Hanukkah, you read the book of Maccabees and it says, and they feasted and they gave gifts. They were partying. They were celebrating. They gave gifts to Yahweh for their deliverance, and they gave gifts to each other. And so therefore, gift giving was actually a part of the original celebration. And yes, it wasn't children getting it every day, and they weren't spinning dreidels every day. But, nevertheless, the difference between the two holidays that take place on different months on the 25th day of each individual month, the difference is you can point to gift giving being part from the original celebration, whereas you can't do that with Christmas.
So I have two questions. One is, so Hanukkah began when the temple was desecrated with the
Right.
pig. Is that a foreshadowing of the Antichrist going into the temple?
Absolutely. One of the misconceptions, though, that I find I have to clear up a lot, and this, of course, comes when I'm doing my course on Daniel, right? Because Daniel is keyed into this event. Um, is that abomination that causes desolation? I've heard a lot of Christians say only happens once, and it's only going to happen in the future. And both of those statements are incorrect. You see, what happens is the Apostle Paul defines the abomination of desolation. So does Yeshua. He speaks of the abomination spoken of by Daniel the prophet, to leave no doubt about that, right? That's in Matthew 24:15. And Paul's definition is evil standing in the place where Yahweh is supposed to be. That's the definition of the abomination that causes desolation. So when Antiochus the fourth and sacrifices pig's blood, by the way, they never used that altar again, placed it because he defiled it so bad. That is the evil standing literally in the place where Yahweh is supposed to be, right at the entrance of the temple, right? So that's fulfillment one of the abomination that causes desolation. Then next one comes in 70 AD. When the Romans march in for their final victory, they got their pagan ensigns marching right around and near where the temple they destroyed was. And then they also sacrificed a pig on the altar there. So that's number two, the evil standing in the place where Yahweh was supposed to be. Next one, Bar Kokhba revolt ends in January 136 CE. In January 136 CE, the Emperor Hadrian, who had previously promised to rebuild the temple, and then he went back on his word because he had the misfortune of having a Samaritan advise him. And the Samaritan said, "Oh, don't trust those Jews, blah, 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 blah," right? What does he do? He builds a temple to Zeus overlooking the ruins of the temple. So there, as if to say, well, your God's down there, and look what we did to him. And our God, Zeus or Jupiter, is above, looking down, standing in the place where Yahweh is supposed to be. Now, this next one's a little tricky. Yeah, we're not done, believe it or not. In 591, the Muslims build on traditional Temple Mount a mosque. There's no doubt that the Muslims, although Semites, count as Gentiles, right? And in this case, if you believe the temple is on the traditional Temple Mount, this would be yet another example of them standing in the place where Yahweh is supposed to be. However, a growing number of our scholars take issue with this. We believe the temple was in the city of David above the Gihon spring, not in the opposite direction of a water supply, the only fresh water supply in Jerusalem that Hezekiah redirected to be in Jerusalem, right? And so that one might not count for those of us who believe the temple is in the city of David. But whether it counts or not, the last abomination that causes desolation would in fact be what is coming in our future. But look at how many iterations that we have had of that abomination that causes desolation, right? And so that's how we have tracked this idea. One other thing that relates to it is I've seen a lot of effort in the church to sort of suggest that the 70th week of Daniel 9 was somehow freeze-dried in ancient times, didn't happen, and then we're going to thaw it out at the end of days. That's not what Daniel says. Daniel basically says that Messiah's 3.5-year ministry is in that 70th week. So the 70th week came and went, by my calculations, from basically Sukkot of the year 26 and ended at the Sukkot of the year 33. Right. So that's your 70th week. Hopefully those pieces help.
So one other question. So wasn't part of this war, not only the abomination of the temple.
Right.
Wasn't this also a clash of ideology between the Greek Hellenistic ideology and the
Yeah.
God fearing ideology?
Yes. And as more evidence comes in, we realize that, the winners kind of write history. Um, and there's always a dark side to it. For example, the Maccabees, and I'll get to this question that you just asked in a second. The Maccabees become the last independent Jewish kingdom of Israel before 1948. They become called the Hasmoneans, but the Hasmoneans broke the law. They were not supposed to be kings because they were not descended from David. And they were not supposed to be priests because they were not descended from Aaron either, although they were of Levitical stock. So what did they do? They wanted to be both kings and priests. And the original priests, who were called the Zadokites, are all of a sudden out of a job. And they trekked 12 miles south of Jerusalem and helped the Essenes write the Dead Sea Scrolls. But you don't hear that side of the story because Hasmoneans won, right? And my people are rejoicing. Josephus, who is writing this history, is basically descended on his mother's side from the same victorious Hasmoneans. So he's going to be thinking about this in a way completely different from the Essenes in the Judean desert, right? Now, for this other part, just give me a second here. Rephrase that first part of the question again, please.
It's a clash between the ideology of the Greek Hellenistic
Yes.
and the God fearing.
Yep, absolutely. And the new picture that is emerging is that, yes, there was this important victory against the foreigners, but it was an equally serious civil war between two worldviews, between two brothers who became high priests, and one would depose the other. There was, and the two different types of high priests is, there was Jason, who was pretty Hellenistic, and then there was Menelaus, who was even more Hellenistic. So neither one of them were super on the Jewish tradition, but Jason believed that you could accept some Hellenism within Jewish framework and learn to dialogue, whereas Menelaus was out to kill Judaism at its source, and he wanted to use the army of Antiochus to wipe every believer in Yahweh off the face of the earth. Okay, so that was the clash between Hellenistic, but keep some Jewish stuff in place, at least for a season, or so Hellenistic that everyone who isn't needs to die. And fortunately, the moderate side rather eventually won that, and so that we could get to at least the promise of a better, more conservative Judaism returning to the land. Unfortunately, history tells us it really didn't. It had some spurts and some, uh, little times when that conservatism returned, but it didn't return completely. Don't get another Hezekiah or Josiah for the last 100 years with the temple standing and stuff like that. So yes, I would simply say to those who are advocating the old way of looking at it as us against the Greeks, or the new way of looking at it as Jew against Jew, that both are correct. You don't need to choose one over the other. The facts on the ground support both ways of looking at that history.
Do you feel that we're in a way kind of replaying that history right now with the way that the world is going?
Oh, sure. There is a war against the Bible. There is a war against the people of the Bible. There is a war that is basically saying, if you believe in the Ten Commandments and the Golden Rule, you're either an idiot or a terrorist, And so I'm sorry to have to say that, because I don't like to necessarily get to where that leads, right? But I would be lying if I didn't see an incredible war against the values of Jews and Christians, especially here in the United States. You know,
I think it's in Israel as well. I mean, when you've
oh
got
yeah,
certain parades in
June
Jerusalem.
is Gay Pride Month in Israel. Okay, so when we came in, imagine this. Okay, we fly into Ben Gurion, and then we find this hotel that is right next to the Jerusalem Great Synagogue. And that was just an amazing discovery. It's like, oh my goodness, we're going to do Shabbat in the Great Synagogue. And it was wonderful, right? We had to wait over an hour because the gay pride parade had blocked off the street. And the IDF rolling their eyes and shaking their heads in disgust, right? Said, we are very sorry. You know, this is not what we want, but this is what the government was making them do. And why a conservative government would do that is beyond me. I think Bibi might have not been told in time to put a stop to this. And we were there for 3 weeks in June, and those gay rainbows were everywhere we went.
Oh,
Okay.
well, last time I was there were Madonna pictures everywhere. And I think the Pope, it was at the time that Pope was cutting a deal to buy the old quarter, like
Right.
the upper room. That's when I was there. And I mean, but it was disgusting to see pictures of Madonna who had just came from Rome, and uh, some type of a concert. Anyway, interesting. So, what other things can we learn in the few moments that we have left about light and Torah, either in the Torah, Tanakh, or Brit Hadashah?
Yeah. Well, there is no substitute for light. And uh, light is far more than just a temporary shooing away of physical darkness. Spiritual light is such that the Israelites had light in their dwellings just before the Exodus, while the rest were in total darkness, a darkness that could be felt, and yet there was a protective light that that the Israelites had, which was their protection, from the darkness that was around them. That light of protection is so critical because without my people, without the Jewish people, you don't get any part of your Bible. Okay. And so, as Paul said in Romans 3, what advantage has the Jew? In every way, they have been entrusted with the proclamations of God, you know. And so that's why there has always been a light around my people. Not that they didn't sin, not that they didn't do horrible things, but they paid for that. They were exiled. Their temples were destroyed. They were exiled for 1,800 years. The 10 tribes still haven't fully come back, and it's almost 3,000 years since they went, you know? So what we need to understand is that light gathers us all, Jews and Christians, Jews and Gentiles. That light gathers us all under the banner of our God, Yahweh of hosts. And there is no substitute for that light, because that light also it represents safety. You're safer in the day. It also represents freedom from darkness and fear, and even freedom from cold, because the light is meant to keep you warm, right? So these are the things that even the Essenes who wrote the Dead Sea Scrolls would talk about the sons of light versus the sons of darkness in their apocalyptic literature, and that there would be a final battle, and that what they called the three traps of Belial. Belial means worthlessness, or a demon that represents worthlessness. The three nets of Belial would capture all wicked, the sons of light would be victorious, literally walking in the light. Okay, because they kept the Torah, which is also derived in Aramaic from the word for light. And so there's Torah, there's light, there's covenant, there's creation, representing warmth, representing protection, and of course, representing truth. Above all other things, representing the truth. You just read John 1:14, and you'll see that, and 1 verse 9, the light that shines in the darkness, and the darkness could not overtake it, right? The spiritual darkness could not overtake it, because the light of the word made flesh has come to defeat it. And that's still happening now. So I think that's the best I can wrap that up for you.
I think you mentioned that darkness that was tangible. And
Mhm.
in my mind, when I think about that, because that's what I do is ponder the word,
Mhm.
and is that where evil came from? That was so tangible that, so like you said, the light envelops us, the light is within us with the Ruach HaKodesh in the spirit.
Mhm.
Then, but the Egyptians, the Mizraim, they when uh, Pharaoh did not let go the people, there was this tangible darkness, and I have to wonder if that's. I mean, I'm very simplistic. Is that when, like, people always ask the question, when was evil created? God had to do, like, contract. Yeah, that's one way of thinking about it. Maybe you can shed some light on that
Yeah, yeah.
topic.
Oh, yeah. And the light of truth that is coming to the world. Yes, I'll try. 1 second is the first name of Satan, whether Hillel in Hebrew or Lucifer, is light bearer, because when he was being good, he brought the light, literally, right? But then he fell, and he took a third of the angels with him. And in my chronology, and I know this is somewhat open to interpretation, so you guys don't have to email me and go, well, I think it's this. I already know. Okay, but what we see is that when he fell, it said it also references chasing the tail of the dragon as he falls. That's in Job. And when he fell, I think he fell straight to earth and became the serpent in Eden directly, as opposed to the serpent having been there, and Satan sort of like playing the role of a dark lord in a fantasy novel, woke the serpent up and turned him into a servant of evil. I think the serpent was Satan directly after he fell, because he's walking on 2 legs, and only after after the judgment that he gets, you will crawl on your belly all the days of your life, which means he wasn't crawling on his belly before that judgment. So for me, you get this straight shot from your Hillel, your bearer of light in heaven, falling as the dragon, right? And of course, in Hebrew, dragon, serpent, worm, they're all kind of related, coming to earth as some type of 2-legged being that is sent to tempt Adam and Eve, and is punished by becoming a literal serpent crawling on the ground. One other thing about that is the word for serpent is nahash in Hebrew, and the word for divination is also nahash in Hebrew. So you could make a powerful argument, right, that divination comes straight from the serpent, which comes straight from Satan. So
Why it's forbidden.
exactly. Yeah, that might be a clue. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah,
might be.
please don't ever do this. And if you're wondering if my Urim and Thummim are that, they're not. If they are approved, and because only priests can know this, you're not a priest. You don't need to know how that works, and you don't need to think about how to work it yourself. So just go home, because that's what a lot of folks are. Well, didn't the high priest do some type of divination? Didn't Lavan do some divination? Yeah. Well, in Lavan's case, that was Father Yahweh speaking through his paganism, telling him not to harm Jacob, and Lavan obeyed. So we got the details on the ground, and the differences, and those details really, really matter. You cannot use the exception to disprove the rule. It's just bad process.
Well, with the Urim and the Thummim, the communication actually was from God.
Yeah, and by the way, Urim, lights.
Mm-hmm.
And
that's why I mentioned it. Yeah, lights.
Tumim, perfection. So your Urim and your Thummim are the perfection lights.
Yes. Yeah. Well, everybody, have a blessed and light. Let light be your path, and a blessed Chag Sameach, Hanukkah. And thank you so much, Andrew, for bringing a little light with all this dark news. I mean, I know the red wave is swept and all this, and people are kind of back to normal and happy and all this. But quite frankly, we live in a very concerning, troubling world right now. And whether the red wave is legitimate or not, we don't know at this point. It has
Remember, that's when Solomon was vulnerable, when
Yeah.
he had no enemies, when everything seemed to be going his way. To paraphrase a line from a book, a fiction book I'm fond of, evil doesn't sleep; it waits.
Yeah.
So
thank you, everyone. Thank you, Andrew. Chag Sameach, Hanukkah. Well, you're already.
That's okay. I got a ton of friends that are doing it right now that are saying, come over to the house and everything. So I don't mind 2 Hanukkahs.
Yes, light is always good.
Ow, twist my arm. I have to do Hanukkah again. What a burden. No, I think
I have to eat
okay.
those donuts. It's a real burden.
Yeah. So.
Well, today I'm going to celebrate this afternoon with my sister, and I'm going to put up some twinkle lights and my Hanukkah. And let's just real quick, it'll only take a second. What is the difference between the menorah and the Hanukkah?
And by the way, I was actually in a fast food restaurant. They had both. They had they had a menorah to the left, Hanukkah to the right. I thought that's pretty cool. Anyway, very, very quickly, a menorah is what was in the temple. It's 7-branched candelabra, whatever you want to call it, and that's where you would put the oil in to make the Ner Tamid, the eternal light that showed Yahweh's continuing presence on the earth. And so, that was built by Moses and Bezalel, stuff like that, in the book of Exodus. Now, because you needed 9 candles to commemorate specifically the Hanukkah event, because remember, you've got your servant candle that's in the middle that lights the others. And because of the later rabbinic telling of the story, that your 1-day supply of oil for 8 days, you're taking your servant candle, your shamash candle, and you are lighting each of the others representing a day. So that's why it's 9 for Hanukkah. And so it's called a Hanukkah to distinguish it from the menorah, which is only 7.
So did the menorah have a servant candle?
Yeah. I think it did. I don't know if it was specifically called that, but the people that were inaugurating the Hanukkah event knew about the priestly traditions. And so whatever they knew applied to the menorah, I think they very seamlessly transitioned to the Hanukkah. And I think that when you read the writings of Hillel and Shammai, when they talked about this, it's pretty clear they're basing it on the prior temple model. So that's what I go with.
So let's both close with something that we really appreciate. So what I really appreciate about Hanukkah and is when I take the shamash and I light the candle and then I light another one. It is light is something that you can give without diminishing yourself. And so
Right.
when you're giving your the light of the Lord to others, you can
Right.
freely share that infinitely.
Yeah.
It's not like, I can only clean the house so far as a gift, or I only have so much money, and so I can't give a nice enough gift. With light, you can just give, and it doesn't diminish you at all. So, what's your favorite thing to ponder about light?
Well, I go back to where we started the conversation, looking at, the Hebrew connection that with the olive, there is light. And when you swap out the olive for the similar sounding iron, you get blindness. I love stuff like that in the Hebrew text because it really shows a divine watermark in the text. It's not just some random thing. It's the Hebrew speaking across time from heaven to earth to me personally. And so, what I love about Hanukkah, I love watching that light grow for the very reason that you just said, that you don't diminish your light when you share it, you multiply the light of Yahweh. And then it goes from where you are to throughout the world. And that light, of course, will link me straight back to John 1. Right? And the fact that Yeshua kept Hanukkah. And here he is, the light of the world, conceived right on the fifth night of Hanukkah, in the middle of the Festival of Lights. So if you needed a reason to do Hanukkah, I can't think of a better one than to celebrate the conception of the light of the world. Uh, and all of those connections, as the weather turns cold, as winter is drawing near, and as for a lot of us, we seem to be entering into an uncertain season, and we would be entering into that uncertain season regardless as to who won. It would just be a different series of uncertainties, and of course, everyone who loses is going to be mucking things up for the people who won. It's just the way it goes. But the light of the world, the light of truth, the light of Yeshua has the potential to unite us all, and that we can share things in truth and in love, as Yeshua did. There weren't too many people that Yeshua talked to who said, "I agree with you 100%." Whether they were Pharisees, whether they were Romans, whether they were, just corrupt elite, he came for them all. And he came to bring that one light to everybody. And that is what I would, I look forward to every year. That as we transition into cold, dark season, the light in our dwellings remains strong like it did for the Israelites in Egypt.
So, amen and amen. Thank you so much, Andrew.
Yeah,
Um, God bless you all out there, and we will see you the next time on the Celestial Report.